But if we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name's Beau. My wife Carly and I, we get the pleasure of serving on the staff team here at Legacy Church, and we're so honored to do that. We have recently, Carly and I, transitioned to a family of 5. We have 3 little girls. So send advice, please. I don't know what we're doing. They're all under 5, and at some point we're going to have 3 teenage girls in our house, and I'm really scared. But we've got a picture. I've got a picture of them just so y'all can get to meet them if you haven't already. Right? Did pretty good. Did pretty good. I kicked my coverage with Carly for sure. So that's me holding Ozzy, Carly's holding Rory, and then Joey, our oldest, is right there. She turns 5 next month. She's definitely the oldest, very bossy, very independent, but a ton of fun. Ozzy, the one I'm holding, you can kind of tell she's a bit wild. She's our spicy child. For sure, she's all things rough and tough. Like the other week, we have a little small swing set in our backyard, and she just bolts out of the back door. Like unlocks it, takes off running, full sprint, tries to like belly dive on the swing so she can go back and forth, and just misses. Like completely face plants on the ground, and I'm waiting and waiting a while. She just gets up, I'm okay, and just like dusts herself off, keeps going. She is something else. And then there's Rory. She's 8 months. She's so sweet, so smiley. Honestly, I think God knew we couldn't take another spicy child. So Rory is definitely proof of God's mercy in the form of a baby. And if you're wondering what life is like for us right now, I've got a fun little clip for you. If we want to go ahead and roll that video.
Princess. I'm the bad princess. I destroy the world.
They're okay. They're all okay. You can see Ozzy walking off right there. She's crying. It's a fake cry. She's like, she knows she's in trouble, is what's happening. And Joey's fine, no chipped teeth there. But that is life every 15 minutes for us, basically, at this point. And so it's loud. It's wild. It's beautiful. It is so overwhelming and so overstimulating at times. And some days really just feel full of joy. You young parents in the room or parents, I know you've probably felt this way, but some days we're just in survival mode, trying to make it to bedtimes, right? Can you get an amen? Yeah, right there. You get it. You got young kids, Demo. Some of us might feel that same way spiritually. We might feel that way in our lives right now, right? Like we're doing all of the right things. We're reading our Bible. We're coming to church. We're praying for our kids. We're praying for our health, our job. We're doing all of the things that Christians do. But if we're honest, we're exhausted, right? We're tired of hoping, not sure if God hears our prayers anymore. And so the psalm that we're going to read today, Psalm 77, it kind of meets us in that place, right? It's not a psalm of triumph. It's a psalm of tension. It's a psalm that doesn't really tidy everything up by the end, but it points us to something deeper than resolution. What it does, it'll point us back to God himself. And so if you got your Bibles, go ahead and crack them open to Psalm 77. If you don't, it's on your handouts. We'll also have it on the screens for you. Take a little sip of water. Psalm 77 says, I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night, I stretched out my untiring hands, and I would not be comforted. I remembered you, God, and I groaned. I meditated, and my spirit grew faint. You kept my eyes from closing. I was too troubled to speak. I thought about the former days, the years of long ago. I remembered my songs in the night. My heart meditated, and my spirit asked, will the Lord reject me forever? Will he never show his favor again? Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Has his promise end for all time? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion? Then I thought to this I will appeal. The years when the Most High stretched out his right hand, I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will consider all your works and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your ways, God, are holy. What God is as great as our God. You are the God who performs the miracles. You display your power among the peoples. With your mighty arm, you redeemed your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. The waters saw you, God. The waters saw you, and they writhed. The very depths were convulsed. The clouds poured down water. The heavens resounded with thunder. Your arrows flashed back and forth. Your thunder was heard in the whirlwind. Your lightning lit up the world, and the earth trembled and quaked. Your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters. Though your footprints were not seen, you led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. Okay, that was a lot. But we're going to give a little context here to this psalm, right? This psalm was written by a guy named Asaph. He was one of David's chief musicians. Think worship pastor, right? But don't think like chipper, always upbeat guy. He's not playing Caleb's greatest hits. He wrote some of the most emotionally raw and intense psalms in the Bible. We know that Asaph is someone that walked with God. He led his people in worship, but still he battled despair. Psalm 77 is a lament psalm. It's a lament passage. That's just a biblical category we often can avoid, right? Because it doesn't feel victorious. But lamenting to God, it's one of the most powerful things you can do. It says, God, I trust you enough to bring you my disappointments. And that might feel a little counterintuitive, maybe a little taboo. Like, I can't be disappointed with the way I feel about God right now. That feels wrong. Let me let you off the hook a little bit here. It's okay to feel disappointed sometimes. It's totally fine. It's not the being disappointed that gets us in trouble. It's what we do or what we don't do as Christians that can be the problem. So lamenting is not a lack of faith. It's a form of faith because you're still talking to God, right? We're still seeking him. Some scholars believe that this Psalm 77, was sung by the whole congregation during maybe an exile or a national mourning. We know from the tone that it was written in a really kind of dark place, but it was sung very much in public. And so that's why we're going to sing it right now. Any volunteers want to come up? No? Maybe I'll go back and sing it. You guys would find out pretty quick why I never auditioned for the worship team here. Which, speaking of, how great was that today? They were awesome, right? Yeah, you can give them a round of a hand. Fun fact, Austin, who's up here quite a bit, he's our worship leader. Those are his two sisters who are helping us out today. They're going to take this show on the road to Branson. That's significant, though, okay? So that context right there, what it does is it tells us that it's okay to grieve out loud in the presence of God's people. That's why some of the songs that we sing here, they're not always triumphant, but sometimes they're songs of sorrow, songs of lament, that can turn into rejoicing, right? We're meant to lament. We're meant to grieve among our peers. Like, how powerful is it that we can see members of our church who we know are going through a lot, right? Like, maybe it's infertility. Maybe it's a cancer diagnosis. Maybe it's a health scare, a job loss, some sort of emotional loss. You're grieving, right? We can look around. Somebody's going through a storm or trial that we know about, but yet we can still see them in here praising God for who he is, what he's already done. That's powerful. That's what we're meant to do. So it's okay to look around at people while you sing worship. Just don't stare too long. It gets weird. And so we're just gonna take the next little bit. We're gonna break down this psalm. So if you're taking notes in your handouts right there, number one, God is the same in the silence. God is the same in the silence. These are verses 1 through 9. I'm not gonna sing it, don't worry. Asaph writes, I cried aloud to God. He says, my soul refused to be comforted, right? Asaph is not playing church here. He's not giving Sunday school answers, not speaking the Christianese, doing the lingo, right? This isn't just a hobby to him. And this shouldn't just be a hobby to us. Like, how boring of a hobby would just coming to church be? There's so many better hobbies you can do. Take up golf. Slightly frustrating, but equally as fun. But we can see that he's not doing that. Like, he's in the thick of this. He's crying out to God. He's unable to speak. His soul refuses to be comforted. He can't talk. Have you ever been there? I know I've been there, but have you ever been there? Where the night just kind of stretches on like it's not going to end? Maybe your prayers feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling. You see other people's breakthroughs and it just makes you want it even more. He's asking some deep questions here, right? Like he's saying, has God rejected me? Did his love dry up? Has he forgotten how to be gracious to me? And here's what we need to see is through that passage, God is not rebuking Asaph for asking those questions, right? God is welcoming those questions. He's welcoming that grief in. God would rather have your honest frustrations than this fake shell of a faith that we sometimes feel like we need to put on, right? We don't need to clean up our emotions or ourselves before we come to God. He already knows. He's big enough to handle that doubt. This story, it reminds me of the story of Job. And we know in Job lost everything. He lost his health. He lost his family. He lost it all. And he didn't sit in silence. Job, in that story, did not sit in silence pretending to be okay. He questioned. He lamented. And God, at the end of the story of Job, he says, Job has spoken rightly of me. And so this Christian life isn't always about standing tall with your big chest out. Sometimes it's just whispering in like a really dark, quiet place, like, God, I need you. God, please help me. It's not always loud confidence. Sometimes it's just that quiet desperation. And that crying out, that quiet crying out in desperation, that is an act of faith. We know Paul says in Romans 8:26 that the Spirit helps us in our weakness. When we don't know what to pray, the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And so I know I'm not getting that far up there in age, getting up there slowly, but I'm doing it. But I know maybe a lot of you probably feel so. You guys ever just like gotten off the couch, or maybe you're out of bed and you just kind of just give a little grunt? Just like a little groan? I'm alone in that? Okay. It's just kind of, it's involuntary, right? But like we're so planted in our spot. And we got to move, we got to do something. The kids want an animal cracker, whatever. And that noise is just kind of a reaction to the movement, right? What Paul's saying here is, if all you have to offer to God as a groan is just a movement, that you're not failing, right? We're moving forward. We're praying. The Spirit is interceding on our behalf. So even when you don't have the words, right, the Spirit's still there. That silence is not spiritual failure. It's often the times where God is really listening closest to us. And so your doubt doesn't dethrone him. Your questions don't disqualify you. The silence is not an absence of faith. It's a soil that's being cultivated where the trust is being grown. We know that Jesus himself wept, right? He wept at Lazarus' tomb. He cried out in Gethsemane. He cried out on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? So if Jesus lamented, if our Savior lamented, we're not less spiritual for doing the same thing, right? Don't buy that lie that struggling in the silence equals unfaithfulness. Number 2 in your notes, God is the same in the remembering. God is the same in the remembering. These are verses 10 through 12. Asaph writes, then I said, I will appeal to this. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Okay, so verse 10 right here, what it's doing is it's marking a pivot point, right? It's kind of changing tone. It doesn't suddenly get happy, but Asaph chooses something here. He chooses to remember. It's not toxic positivity. It's not denial. He's disciplining himself. It's a spiritual disciplining. He's telling himself, speaking it into his soul. He's saying, I will remember. I will meditate. I will ponder it. What he's doing here, he's not waiting to feel differently. He's not waiting on something to come. He's choosing to think differently. Spiritual discipline, right? In that fog of pain that he's going through, he slows down and he anchors to the truth. Kind of like driving in a heavy fog. What do? When you're driving on the road in a heavy fog, you don't speed up, right? You slow down. You fix your eyes on the road. You're looking straight ahead. You focus. You're looking at what you know is solid. And when life is cloudy and when feelings lie, to us, the fact of who God is in that fog, it's not changing. God's nature is not changing. And so what is Asaph remembering here, right? He remembers the Red Sea. He remembers the Exodus. He remembers God's power and God's mercy on display for his people. That's why throughout the Bible, God constantly calls us to remember. David does it in the Psalms. We know the famous one. Why are you downcast, O my soul? Forget not all of his benefits. So why do we do that? Why do we remember? Why do we need to discipline memory into ourselves? Because memory is a weapon. If the enemy can make you forget, he can make you fear. And if we don't remember God's faithfulness, we'll start to believe the lies that creep in. Hebrews 13:8 says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And in the light of what we're reading, that kind of hits differently here, right? Like that is a foundational truth to our faith. That the same God who split the sea, if Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever, back then, if this is the same God who split the sea, he sustained Israel in the wilderness, he showed up in fire and cloud, that is the same God who took on flesh, he carried our cross, he defeated death, and he walked out of that grave. And so Asaph, what he's doing, he's remembering the Red Sea. We get to remember the cross, right? Asaph remembers God's power. We remember the empty tomb. As Psalm 77 meditates on God's past faithfulness, we meditate on that faithfulness fulfilled through Jesus. Because if Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever, then his love hasn't dried up, the grace from him has not run out, and his promises are still active in our lives right now. And so, in remembering, how many of us have ever had our photo taken before? Should all raise your hand here. Or you're a liar, we'll talk after church. It's fine. Or maybe you're a vampire, I don't know. I mean, how often do we use photos and videos to remember? That's why I showed you all a photo and video. I mean, my wife is beautiful. My kids are cute. They're hilarious. They're crazy. But memory strengthens. Those photos and videos strengthen our memory, right? Maybe some of you had some old glamour shots from back in the days when you were a kid at the J.C. Penney's, wearing some Gap denim overalls. You're not sure why your parents threw out all these cool clothes. You're kind of frustrated. Sometimes I'll go back and I'll look at our wedding photos. Carly and I had a eventful wedding day, to say the least. I will say it's my favorite wedding I've ever been to. I feel like I don't have to say that. I mean it. But we had this outdoor wedding. It was going to be late in the afternoon, kind of late summer, middle of August. And the forecast looked great leading up to it. We're like, oh, this is going to be awesome. Small percentage of chance of rain creeped in a few days before, about 5%, then up to 10% the next day. And then the morning of our wedding, I was working. I've dealt with that now, don't worry. I was working the morning of our wedding, and I just get a call from my brother-in-law, and he's like, hey, man, you probably need to come down to the venue. You need to come down to the land, and we had this outdoor wedding. I was like, oh, what's going on? He's like, you just need to come down. So I get in my car, and I start driving down I-49, and there's just this big black cloud right there in South Washington County. And I'm like, oh, I know what this is. We're getting rained on. I pull up, and it wasn't just a little bit of rain. I mean, that cloud came out of nowhere, dumped rain. I think it was like a small tornado that happened. It knocked down 10 trees. It busted 2 gas lines on the property. And I walk in, I'm like, cool. Well, we're still going to get married, but you guys are not coming. No big deal. But I remember walking into the room where Carly was. I closed my eyes. No superstitions broken. Closed my eyes. I just remember hugging Carly and just kind of comforting her, telling her everything's going to be okay. And we have a photo of that moment. I didn't put it up there. But we have a photo of that moment. And when I go back and look at that, I mean, I look at it probably every month or two. I show my kids. And it just strengthens the memory of how great that day was. That despite everything that happened, we still got married. It was a small town. All these random people I've never met before just start showing up with chainsaws and trucks and hauling stuff off. And we have pictures of all of that. But those photos, it jogs my memory and it strengthens, honestly, it strengthens my affections. In that same way, when we remember, that spiritual memory can strengthen our faith. We remember maybe the time that God answered that prayer, Or maybe that time God sent a friend when you really needed one. You're struggling with something, you got a text out of the blue, hey, you want to grab some dinner? Or maybe the time that you had a peace that just really didn't make sense. You're going through something really deep. You had a peace that surpassed understanding, right? You don't know how you had peace, but we did. And so if you don't remember, you'll forget. And if you forget, the enemy will try to use that as a foothold to twist and to pervert you into thinking that God has abandoned you, right? We can get so caught up, we can get so busy that we forget all the good that God's already done in our lives. So sometimes we just need to take a moment and we need to discipline ourselves. We need to preach into our soul the remembering of what God has already done. Number 3 in your notes, God is the same on both sides of the miracle. God is the same on both sides of the miracle. These are verses 13 through 20. It says, your way, O God, is holy. Your path led through the sea, yet your footprints were unseen. Okay, so Asaph right here, he's zooming way out. He's zooming way out. He's going 30,000 foot view, right? He's been wrestling in the silence, right? Now he's disciplining himself into remembering the past. And he's anchoring himself to the biggest story that him and his people know, which is the Exodus and the Red Sea miracle. And here's what's wild about what he says about that moment. He says, your footprints were unseen. That God was moving, but it was invisible, right? He was present, but he was undetectable. Maybe that's how some of us feel today, right? You know the right answers, you've got the theology, but you don't see God. You can't see him, you can't feel God, but you're standing in front of that sea and you're just waiting for it to part. And it's not moving. You're just staring at the water. Let me say this next part gently. The miracle isn't always in the sea parting. Sometimes that miracle that you're standing in front of, or that you're standing for, that you're still believing, the miracle is that you're still breathing, right? You're still praying. You're still seeking God. That right there, that's called sustaining grace. And it is every bit as powerful as the wonders and the signs and the miracles that we crave as we stand in front of the sea. The miracles, those signs and wonders, that's not the measure of God's love, though. What the measure is the cross. And that's what we remember back to. And if God had only provided his goodness and his love through saying yes all the time, we'd be crushed when he says no, right? If healing and breakthrough were the only signs of goodness, what would we do when that door stays shut? We would doubt everything, right? That's what the enemy wants. That's what the devil wants. He wants us to get disillusioned with God, to be discouraged by our situation, to be angry at God. But it's his sustaining grace that's sometimes going to be the miracle we need, the mountain-moving miracle that we need in that trial or that storm. The truth of the gospel is, even when I don't see the miracle, right, I've seen the cross. That's the ultimate evidence of God's love. That right there, the cross, the empty tomb, that is the final word on God's commitment back to us. But sometimes we do see the miracle, right? Like we just prayed over Marcus and Tiffany Cook. What a miracle it is that after all of these years, that tomorrow they're going to have their 2 little babies, right? Last week, Jason Combs, faithful man in our church, he came up here. He spoke. He told the story about how God had supernaturally healed his body. He'd been struggling with these horrible headaches, and he had sought treatment. He had sought doctors. They basically told him he was going to have to live with it for the rest of his life, right? And then one day, it's gone. God had touched his body. Jehovah Rapha had healed him. And so what do we do when we're on that side of the miracle, right? We see in John 5, 1 through 8, the story of Jesus healing the man that can't walk. He said, afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. Inside the city, near the sheep gate, was the pool of Bethesda with 5 covered porches. Crowds of sick people, blind, lame, or paralyzed, they laid on the porches. One of the men laying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him, he knew he had been ill for a long time, and he asked him, would you like to get well? The man said, I can't, sir, for I have no one to put me into the pool when the waters bubble up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me. Jesus said to him right there, this is so powerful, stand up, pick up your mat, and walk. This man had been laying on that mat for 38 years, and he was cured from that mat. And Jesus said, pick it up. He says, receive your miracle. Take this story with you and go. So what we are healed from, what we're delivered from when we're on this side of it, you get to carry. You get to use it to tell others of God's goodness in your life. Walking around, hey, what's that mat? Oh, this mat, I was on this for 40 years. I struggled with these headaches for years and years. I struggled not having a kid, but this desire in my heart for years. I've struggled with singleness for years. And God has delivered that. That is a souvenir of the evidence of what God has done in his life, and what God is doing in your life. And it will strengthen you moving forward. So if God does part the sea, carry the mat. Tell the story. Because the God that did that is the same side on both miracles. So where does that land for us? How do we bring this into our living room, right? How do we bring this into our diagnosis, into our quiet car ride home? The 2 a.m. prayers, the long nights that haven't turned into joy-filled mornings yet, right? To those of us waiting, God's delay is not his absence. His silence is not indifference. He may be unseen, but Romans 8, what it does is it reminds us that the Spirit is groaning on our behalf. It's interceding for us. The delay may just be the dark room where that faith is developing. To those broken, your pain isn't a sign that God's abandoned you, and it might just be the place that he meets you most deeply. And because of that, because of the suffering, we know it's not random. We know that Jesus has redeemed it on the cross. So those of us celebrating, maybe you're on that side of the miracle. Don't let it make you forget who gave you the miracle, right? You stay rooted, you carry your mat, we remember the cross, and we go. And to those of us that are weary, we might not see the path, but we know that God's still leading it, right? His footprints, they might not be visible, but they're still holy. He may not part the sea, but we do know that he will walk with us through it. And so I don't know what sea you're standing in front of. I don't know if it's going to part, but I do know that the same God who split the sea, the one who thundered at Sinai, who fed his people in the wilderness, who wept in Gethsemane, who bled and died on the cross, he has not changed, because we know that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so today, I want us to not anchor in the outcomes, right? That's not what I'm trying to say. I want us to anchor to a God who is not changing. Not because he always does what we want, but because he did what we never could. And if the cross is true, and as Christians we believe the cross is true, we know the suffering and the waiting is not in vain. The lament is not wasted. It's not without purpose. Because we know that even when there's no miracle, the same God still gives us mercy. So even when the answer is no, there's still sustaining grace, which is every bit as powerful as the signs and wonders that we're craving in our life. So through the psalm, we see through God's providence, he can redeem in our suffering what in his sovereignty he could have prevented, right?